Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the Marine Fish Conservation Network for the first in our new series of deeper dives into particular topics related to fisheries and fisheries advocacy. This is a complement to our ongoing Waterside Chat series, which I believe is now is beginning its third year, where our host Tom Sadler talks with different people involved in the fisheries world. You can find our past waterside chats on the network's website at conservefish.org or on our YouTube channel. But today we're going to, as I said, start off a new series. We are working on topics for the future, and we'll be coming back to you with those soon. But for now, we're going to look at the very quickly changing world of social media and how it relates to fisheries advocacy. And I would encourage you to get your questions ready because we are eager to hear them. And I'll also be bringing in the network's deputy director and the Waterside Chat host, Tom Sadler, for color commentary every now and then as we go along. So let's get into this. So first question is, why should you people pay attention to me? Well, I've been working with Rob Vandermark, the executive director of MFCN, since for over 20 years, doing public lands related work way back at the beginning. And when the network relaunched in 2015, we've been working together since then. But I've been in the digital politics and advocacy world for more than 27 years. I've been writing about it at epolitics.com for a long time. I'm author of an ebook about digital politics and advocacy, and I play in a kick-ass rock and roll band in Washington, D.C. So with all that, let's start right I started in Texas politics way back in the early 90s. And the thing about Texas politics is that it is played as a contact sport. So I learned very quickly a very pragmatic approach to advocacy and politics and political communications. And I think you'll see that reflected in the conversation we're about to have. But first, why are we on social media at all? Isn't that just where the kids are clicking on the tickety-tock videos? Well, the thing is that social media is these days where the people are. And you want that torch-wielding mob to be on your side, not on the other side. And a very important point is that social media is happening whether you know it or not. People are talking about fisheries issues. People are often spreading things that are not true. And I would give this example. This is my favorite of the images that the Russians were trying to spread in 2016 to disrupt faith in our elections. It's a little over the top, but it is not unusual. Let's just say that the level of disinformation that can spread is truly remarkable. And if you're not in the water, the social media waters, you may not even know it's happening. So let's make a couple of broad points about social media first. So social media is, of course, inherently social, right? It is networks of people communicating with each other and with other similar communities of people. And social media purists that I know will say that if you're not interacting with other people, you're just not using social media. I take a little bit more nuanced approach. I think it's perfectly fine to use it to broadcast information. For many, especially nonprofit organizations, that's pretty much what we do. So, don't be locked into this notion that you have to be engaging with people all the time. However, the more you engage with people, probably the more likely your information is to spread, and the more likely you are to be able to reach new people. So, I want to draw a distinction at the very beginning between social media for individual activism and social media for organizations, because people will use whatever they use in their everyday life to also talk about things in the public world that they truly care about. So if we're organizations or advocates or activists, how can we mobilize folks, right? Because, people may be active on social media channels that an organization may never have heard of and certainly may not have a presence on at all. So a common strategy is to try to turn individual activists or your activists, your people on your email list, people on your Facebook page, turn them into ambassadors for the causes you care about. And so, how do you do this? And I co-wrote a publication, an ebook years ago on this with another organizer. And so there are a lot of different strategies, but it basically comes down to give them something to do and then make it easy for them to do it. So you can have all the good content you can possibly produce. You can have it out there in the world, but if your supporters don't know about it, how can they share it, right? So you'll sometimes see presidential campaigns or activist organization form like social media share squads, where they'll organize people behind the scenes. Presidential campaigns are usually pretty big about this one, but nonprofits can certainly do it as well, and individual activists can do it as well. And the basic idea is you just need to tell people about it, right? Common tools are email, text messages, behind the scenes Slack groups, Facebook groups, Google groups. You can also use Facebook ads or Instagram ads to try to put the content in front of your people and try to encourage them to share. But the easy part is really important. If you're going to text someone or email someone about a piece of content you want them to share, make it so that they can just click one link and go ahead and share it. And if you don't know how to do that, just Google one-click social share links, and you'll find a bunch of different platforms that'll just create a link for you, right? But the idea is to make it as easy as possible for people to act on your behalf. But for organizations, we can't possibly be on every single platform out there. So it's really, if we have to concentrate our resources, we should focus on the platforms that the people who are in your audience actually use. If you're trying to mobilize 23-year-olds to register to vote or something, you're probably going to be using tools like Instagram and TikTok. For a more general audience, you're probably looking at Facebook and Instagram. For opinion leader audiences and activist audiences, journalists, bloggers, people like that, Twitter could be a very useful tool. But as we'll discuss, we'll see how long that remains true. For people who are trying to leverage professional connections, like for instance, I do a training every year for doctors who might run for office. And we talk a lot about LinkedIn there because LinkedIn can be a really powerful way to reach people in defined professions. I have not tried looking for commercial fishermen on it, but it might be worthwhile. And then if you're trying to reach, there's so many other platforms out there. For instance, if you're trying to reach gamers, you're probably going to need to be active on Twitch or more likely recruit someone who already is. So this is a natural good place to pause and see if we have questions or if Tom Sadler would like to dive in.
I'm happy to dive in. I think one of the points or the 2 points that you made that are essential to this to be effective is you've got to ask people to do something. And I think this is really even or as equally as important is you got to make it easy for them. If you, and this goes back all the way to the direct mail days to, any kind of marketing or activism, if it requires them to do more than 2 things, they're probably not going to do it. And so, I remember back to the days of on political campaigns on doing get out the vote. And, we gave everybody who was calling a script, and we made it so that if it was a very simple lineal, do this, then do this, then do this, and you can, And if you need help, here's how you get it. And so I think those are particularly are important in terms of doing effective stuff. And then, I think the other thing is that keep it simple. I know you are a big advocate for that, especially those of us who spent time in the policy arena, we have a tendency to overstate our case. We try to cover every contingency, every nuance. If you read newspaper articles, for example, they don't kind of go back and relitigate or re-explain every item that they're talking about. It's, Charlie Smith did this, then that happened, then this happened, and it's not, they don't try to over explain it. And I think that's really important in terms of both getting the message out, but getting people to remember the message. It's, it's a lot like, can you write it on a bumper sticker? There was a great movie producer out in Hollywood who said, if you can't write your idea on the back of my business card, you don't have a clear idea. And and you talk to the campaign professionals, they'll say, if you can't get it on a bumper sticker, you don't have a clear message. I saw Carville was on last night talking about, the controversy around Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and the Kansas City Chiefs. And, he said, it's so amazing to see people broadcasting they're stupid. And Carville is, a perfect example of somebody who can distill a very, I don't want to say complex, but broad subject into a very simple line. Don't broadcast you're stupid. So,
I'll just add on social media, you need to encapsulate it in such a way that it catches people instantly. Videos need to start with a bang whenever possible. Posts should not take a week to get, the text of a post should start with the most important parts, right? Because most people are not going to read beyond the first line. And I'll just add, what you're talking about with, keeping it simple. There's this idea of the paradox of choice, that if you give people too many options, their easiest option is to do none of them. So if you send somebody an email with 3 different things they could do, you may well get less response than if you sent a message with just one. So that's why action alerts, you get from organizations typically focus on a single action. And if the action is to try to get people to share things on social media, then you should do the same. And I'll note that social share asks, when you ask, via email or something, can be a good way to break up your email content calendar, especially for that spend a lot of time fundraising. Asking people to do something that doesn't involve money can be a nice change of pace and can help keep people engaged. So any questions from folks? Check the chat here 1 second.
There you go.
Kevin Scribner, ever mused about designing your dream social media platform? No, not really my thing. I am very happy to let others try to imagine ideal social worlds. I'm going to stick to trying to figure out how these work. But it's a fun question. Thank you, Kevin. So why don't we go ahead and dive into the big platforms and just talk about the more recent developments, some of the misconceptions that are out there. And then, again, we can take more questions. So let's start, of course, with Facebook. And when I say Facebook, in this case, I'm also talking about Instagram, since they are, Facebook bought Instagram. It must be 10 years ago now, at least. And especially on the administrative back end, they are more and more integrated all the time, particularly with things like paid promotions and advertising. But and there, a few years ago, especially after the Cambridge Analytica hack of Facebook data, after the Russians and other bad actors were trying to pit us against each other during the 2016 election. There was a small move for people to boycott Facebook, but it is not going away anytime soon. People are spending a little less time on it these days, but they're not abandoning it. So it's still a very good place to look for new supporters and to keep your existing supporters engaged in between the moments when you have a real substantive action for them to take. So now this has been a trend. So let's look at some real trends here. Visual content still works best. I mean, of course, on Instagram. Instagram is a visual medium. But even on Facebook, it's really important that your content stands out visually whenever possible. And in a second, a little more about that. A more recent development, about 8 or 9 years ago, Facebook was really pushing people into video, and a lot of publishers invested heavily in video. And then when Facebook, pivoted away from that somewhat, a lot of those folks lost a whole lot of money. But video is still very powerful on Facebook. One problem is, and this is one reason it helps to start with a bang, it's very easy for people to skip it. When you look at the number of views that your video has, a whole lot of those are someone looking at it for a second or two, right? So again, that's why it really helps to start your content with a bang. Now, Reels are a little more recent, last 2 or 3 years. It's basically like TikTok. One video plays, then another video plays, then another video plays. The network has been experimenting with these to see how they perform differently than videos that we post normally. Typically, we're taking a video, creating it, publishing it as a normal video, and then creating it as a reel. So the same content, a little bit different presentation, and then people interact with them differently. But the good bit is that you can now link from a reel to a longer video. So Kevin Scribner is on the call. When he did his Waterside Chat with us back in December, our video guru, Joe Knight, pulled out little segments from it, 30 seconds, a minute, and we posted those as individual videos, but also as reels linking back to his full Waterside Chat. So again, who knows what'll happen, but it's definitely something to pay attention to if you're creating a good bit of video, or if you can find excuses to one of your issue experts or one of your supporters, 30 seconds talking about a thing. You never know what might catch the eye of someone and spread more widely. So I also want to mention for sure advertising. The network actually uses Facebook advertising, but I'll talk about a little bit. But the thing about Facebook is you can target people based on basically everything Facebook knows about them, their online behavior, its estimate of even there are you can target people by income, you can target people by profession or job title, you can target people demographically, geographically. There are many different options. Now the ads have gotten more expensive over time, but the network has used them, I think, pretty effectively to reach into particular communities. And I will note that advertising is the only way to get a link on Instagram. Normal Instagram posts don't have clickable links. The only way to get a link is either to put it in your bio, your description, or to run an ad. Now, political advertisers, again, since the hullabaloo around 2016, political advertisers have to have a disclaimer, as in this is paid for by, and you have to jump through some extra approval hoops. So if you have something coming up and you know you're going to be running Facebook ads, and Facebook considers, for instance, climate change to be political, right? There are a lot of things that we in the fisheries community may not think are political, but Facebook designates as political. So you want to get your disclaimers lined up, your approvals set up well before you actually need to do it. So what's the network been doing? We've been, for one thing, posting a whole lot of links. Now, there are different ways to build value for people out on the internet, but one of the from the early days of the web, curating content and then allowing other people to share it or to see it. It's been one of the great ways to build a following and again to provide value to people. So we post a lot of news stories related to our work. But when we have our own content, we optimize it for sharing. You'll see the post there off to the right. John McMurray, one of our bloggers, very good at providing excellent photographs. When you're talking to people who care about fish, photos of fish do tend to catch the eye. So we try to put striking photos into all of our blog posts and articles so that when they're shared to social media, and we've set up the basic things you have to do behind the scenes to make sure that the photo and the headline and all that's going to flow, we optimize our content for sharing. And we have one-click share buttons on every page on the site. So you can share to LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, just by pushing a button. And quite easy to do, honestly. And if you have more questions about anything like this, I'm very happy to talk afterwards. So, but we've also been running advertising. We've been running ads designed to get people to follow our page and targeting them at commercial fishing communities in the United States. A lot of smaller commercial ports on the West Coast, the Northeast, the Gulf. And over the last few months of doing that, we've recruited well over 1,000 or about 1,000 people who are somehow connected to commercial fishing, whether fishermen themselves, family members, but basically people who have expressed an interest on Facebook in commercial fishing. Now, how Facebook knows that is Facebook's magic. But we were able to grow our community significantly. And of course, now the trick is to find good things for us to ask them to do. And then when we have articles or upcoming waterside chats, Rob, the network director, is very good at setting up promotions that are targeting particular communities, regions, and people with particular interests. So I think this is a great time to pause, see what Tom would like to add, and then check out another comment here.
I think you make another good point, is that it's a visual medium more and more, and that brevity is becoming not just the soul of wit, but the coin of the realm. See how many cliches I can put into one statement?
Very impressive.
Yeah, at least from my experience with people looking at Facebook, looking at Twitter, looking at whatever, if they have to spend more than 20 seconds on it, they're going to move on. And you can even see in the content, don't scroll past this. It's like, stop and look at this. And that's important. Enough people are concerned about it to make those kind of statements. And I think, you see when we go beyond the social media, but into the new emerging media like Substack or other sort of hyper blogs, if you will, brevity is the thing that people are really striving for. And I think that's so both visual and concise. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it's tough. It's tougher to do. And I think if you're going to be a good communicator, you've got to be much more Hemingway-esque as opposed to Faulkner-esque in the content you produce.
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to this when we were chatting the other day that I think it was Mark Twain who once wrote to someone saying, I wanted to write a short letter, but I only had time to write a long one,
That's
right?
right.
Because it is harder to write concise. But headlines are really, really, really important, especially the first three or four words. And they're not just important for catching someone's attention, they're also important for search engines, for Google. So,
Well,
Kevin has a
Colin,
question
let me
here.
jump
Oh,
in on
yeah.
one other thing. The other, when you mention headlines, the it's important not to do the follow this story or I think being cute with teasers gets people to slip
Mm,
right by as opposed so if you want somebody to read something, you got to tell them what the subject is. You don't have to give them the
yeah,
whole story in a headline, but you can't just say, I had this great idea, dot, dot, dot. It's like, nah, I ain't got time for you, bud.
yeah, you have to. I say headlines need to sing and they need to sell. They need to catch someone's attention and they need to give them enough information to make them want more, right?
Yeah,
So,
playing it cute
so let's
doesn't
take
work.
Kevin has a.
I just say
What'd you say,
playing
Tom? I'm
it cute.
sorry.
I say playing it cute just doesn't work.
Yeah. All right. So Kevin has a couple of points here. So some time ago, I read about a ladder effect of getting and holding attention. Begin with a visual, follow with with succinct written content, and continue with a podcast. It's sort of a variation of the ladder of the idea of the ladder of engagement. The thing is and this is certainly a valid approach, right? You're going to catch someone's attention with a visual. And then the written content is more likely to be the part that persuades them to, do whatever it is you want them to do. But you also have to be prepared for someone to jump in at some point that you don't expect, right? Not everyone is going to come in the way you think that they are. So yeah, I think of it, a little less of a ladder and more like cars on a train. Some people will board the first car, some people will board the third car, but hopefully we all get to the same destination. And you also note, is the goal of the Waterside Chats to have them perform as a podcast, not just YouTube? Yeah, they are a podcast. We're up on Apple Podcasts, Google, I believe. We're up on at least the three largest podcast platforms. So we take one piece of content, which was a 45-minute or an hour-long conversation. We turn it into a Facebook video, a YouTube video. We embed it on our website. We turn it into a blog post, and then it is also it's a standalone podcast. And then we take clips from it and share them separately. So I am a huge fan of content recycling. Content, as Dick Cheney years ago said, recycling may be a personal virtue. I think content recycling is an organizational virtue that once you put the time into creating something, trying to get as much value out of it as you can. So why don't we move on to our next little bucket here, which perhaps not surprisingly is Twitter. Twitter and its discontents. I actually made that little image to the right with the X over the I, even long before Musk renamed it X. And by the way, I know very few people who call it X. Most of us are not going along with one of the dumbest branding decisions in the history of branding decisions. So let us look at Twitter. So it is not going away yet. The user base has dropped a little bit, and every time there's another Musk scandal, he says something horrifying or hateful or whatever, you'll lose a few more people. And then I've seen some stats that maybe individual usage is down by like the number of users isn't dropping, but the volume is slipping by a few percent. But so far, at least, people aren't really leaving in droves. And if you pay attention to the people that you want to pay attention to, um, i.e., you curate your feed so you're not just seeing what Twitter wants you to see. I'll note that a Twitter list is a very good way to do this. You can avoid the I was about to use a barnyard epithet, but you can avoid the people that Twitter keeps trying to show to you whom you have no interest at all in seeing. So basically, Twitter's trying to fill your feed with crap, but you don't have to see it. But there are a lot of communities that are still very active on Twitter. For years, Black Twitter, for instance, has been a vibrant, thriving activist community. And some people went away, but plenty of folks are still there. And there are many, many other niche communities that, where people just chat amongst themselves on Twitter. And it's still a good place to follow what journalists are doing, to retweet what journalists are doing. There are people who are relevant to your work, to try to catch their eye, that mentioning them when you share something or when you have an idea that you're putting out there. It's a good way to connect with other activists and potentially other organizations. I wonder if we've kind of factored in the Musk madness and we're just going to keep going. But it does have real competitors now. Tom got the network on Threads pretty early, a few months back when it first launched. Threads is Facebook's attempt at a Twitter killer. It just hasn't. Many people moved over there. It was easy because you could transfer your Instagram followers. But what I'm seeing more is people take what they put on Twitter and then go ahead and put it on Threads as well. That's basically what I do. But you can tag people on Threads the same way you can on Twitter. I don't think there's support for hashtags yet, but I would not surprise me if that was to follow. I believe on Twitter, hashtags and at replies, i.e., when you at someone, you mention their Twitter handle. I believe those are things that users did long before Twitter ever adopted them. There are other competitors out there. Blue Sky got a good bit of attention, and I do have friends that are in the more lefty liberal organizing world who have seen some good results on Blue Sky. The thing is, Threads, Blue Sky, and Mastodon is another competitor. One, they don't have the critical mass quite in the way that Twitter does, but because of that, you may stand out a little bit more. So when friends of mine who are using Blue Sky have had good results, it's they're able to connect with a reporter because that reporter is not being barraged as much on that medium. So I think it makes good sense to start a Threads account for an organization right now or for an individual activist. But I would, until things change dramatically, I would keep doing it as a parallel with Twitter rather than a Twitter replacement. And I will note that if your organization or you yourself decide to leave Twitter, do not delete your account. Because if you do, somebody else can take over that username, and maybe somebody you don't want to take over that username, right? So don't delete your account. But if you don't want to be active on a platform that does nothing to silence Nazis most of the time, completely understandable, but I would not delete my account. So, Tom, what would you add? The Threads master.
I think you're absolutely right in terms of Threads or Blue Sky or Mastodon being a Twitter killer. Nobody has achieved that level of whatever, haven't been able to do it.
Scale.
What's interesting to me is there are more people gravitating to Threads than to the other two that you mentioned there. And you're dealing with the meta industry, the meta company, really. I mean, it's all Zuckerberg's company. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, and it's Threads. And so they're not insignificant players in the social media space and have the tools. They've been slow to evolve. You mentioned hashtags, and I'm not. I think they do have hashtags. I don't want to swear to it. Whereas Blue Sky, for example, was invitation only, and then they kind of opened up the invitation when threads started to really dominate. But they do have the listing feature that you talk about, and everybody on threads just begs for that, and they have yet to do it, and I don't understand why not. Mastodon is challenging. It can be really super nichey, and it operates on a different framework. So if I were going to, like, for me, I spend more time on threads than anywhere else, just because I'm repulsed by the activity on Twitter. And it's in terms of using them, I think you have to decide what you want to accomplish, right? So I think if you're trying to share information like news, I think you can do it on threads, and you're going to get quality over quantity. Most of the major news outlets, most of the major, at least political writers that I pay attention to, are on threads and active on threads. We were talking about Charlie Sykes and the Bulwark. I mean, they're still on Twitter, but they're very threads oriented as well. And so it's sort of like, are you want to play in the black hat arena, or do you want to play in the white hat arena? And I think you're absolutely right that you need to be in both. But just to me, I think we're going to continue to see the deprecation of Twitter, just because Musk is uncontrollable. But it right now, it's you got to advertise on there, even if you don't like the ownership.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've got 5,000 followers on Twitter. I've got 110 followers or whatever on Threads.
Sure.
I know where I'm going to get the most response, right? So it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Go where the people are that you need to reach. Yeah. And I think you're very right about Threads. That again, it's that idea that in a smaller pond, your fish might stand out a little bit more. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. And I think you have to look at the communities that are in Threads, and if you can, you can use lists in Twitter to see information, but I don't think you can segregate what gets sent out. I think it just gets sent out to the entire Twitterverse, right?
Yeah.
So, you run the risk of, if you say something about climate change, of attracting, a onslaught of trolls talking about how, it's a communist plot to poison our children's minds.
And you can also ignore every single one of them.
Absolutely. So, well, and that's a whole nother discussion about how you deal with trolls, right? I mean, that's
right. So
that's an interesting social phenomenon.
Yeah. All right. So let us move on to our last major section. And I've included this one because every time I do a talk about social media, I get questions about it. Everybody's kids are on TikTok. So people ask, should our organization or our campaign or our company be out there on TikTok? And if you've never used it, TikTok is short videos. I think they're experimenting with ones that are a minute long, but they've historically been very short. And then they just play one after another, after another, after another. And so even if you get one that you don't like, just wait a second, it'll be gone. Right. It's almost built to be addicting. The big question is your audience on TikTok, right? If you're trying to mobilize commercial fishermen in Alaska, very few of them are likely to be on TikTok. Their kids may be, but they are unlikely to be themselves. And TikTok does not allow political advertising. I think it's okay with get out the vote and some issue advertising, but you still have to be, you have to watch the rules on that one. So it's not as useful campaigns. But if your individual supporters, your activists are using it, it can be pretty powerful. So I'll note that back in 2020, TikTok was, I believe, Joe Biden's second big, pro-Biden content, second biggest platform out there after YouTube. And his campaign did not have a TikTok presence at all. What they did was recruit TikTok influencers and get them to produce content for the campaign. And how do they do that? They organize them via all the channels we talked about, from Slack to text messages to whatever, however you can get to these people. And they gave them video B-roll and talking points and visuals, images to use. They gave them the content to make it easy. Now, of course, they were doing it at a very large scale. And they had a whole lot of money, so they can invest in people to do that. But even a small organization, if you've got a lot of folks that you work with who are active on TikTok, can you do 30 seconds straight to your own phone camera video, right? Things don't have to be slick and fancy. Although maybe get a kid to help you with filters and little visual add-ons and things like that. But yeah, I would not recommend that most organizations in the fisheries advocacy space invest a lot in an organizational TikTok profile, but I would be very aware of the potential for your own supporters to work on your behalf. So, Tom, you want to add anything there?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, so you got a big issue with the ownership of TikTok. I mean, if it is Musk-like in its concern raised by, and in fact, in some states, I believe it's been outlawed, and Virginia might even be one of them, that the government programs cannot use cannot have TikTok accounts. On the other hand, you look at the Washington Post, however, they have a very active TikTok presence. I think your advice on using proxies is probably the smartest one in terms of dealing with TikTok. The other thing I would point out is both Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, Meta recognize that TikTok is very popular, and they are quickly trying to, and that's why the attention is being paid to Reels and TikTok, Twitter video, that they're and YouTube is paying attention to it as well. And so the Google guys are paying attention and making it as easy. And I think that there are a lot of people who want to avoid the Chinese entanglements by going and pushing either Reels or YouTube. And these guys, they have the money, and they're not going to sit silently by while one platform dominates a space if they have anything that they can do about it.
Although good luck, because
sure.
Again, TikTok has the user base locked in. So
absolutely.
And with the ownership issues, to me, it's kind of hard to separate reality from political hysteria on that one.
Yeah.
So
I hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about some changes that are either happening now or could be happening in the future. Our friends, artificial intelligence, the ones who are going to bring the killer robots that will doom us all in the future, or perhaps tomorrow. It's already playing in social media. One, people are able to generate a hell of a lot more content. And a lot of that is going to be disinformation. So the amount of, there was a Slovak election, presidential election, that we don't know, but it may have been swayed by an AI generated audio clip that made the pro-Europe, pro-Ukraine candidate look bad, and he lost, and a pro-Putin anti-Ukraine candidate got in there. And Slovakia early on was giving Ukraine air defense missile systems, things they truly needed. So there is an example where fake audio may have a small influence on the future course of a war, right? So I think everyone needs to be aware that uh, there is a possibility that your organization or you personally or people who work on your issue could be targeted with a wave of disinformation and potentially a wave of personal attacks. I think we are all going to have to get educated about, the same way I don't trust every commercial that I see on television. We're going to have to take that same skepticism and apply it to video and audio online. But it is coming. And not just coming, it's here. Now, the other thing, though, is that the platforms themselves are beginning to use AI to make your life easier, right? So if you are running a Facebook ad now, at least some users, I don't know if it's all users yet, but if you're running Facebook ads, Facebook will tend to look at the text you're using and offer you different versions. There's a tool out there for Democratic campaigns and left-leaning organizations called Quiller, which takes the same approach to email fundraising. You give it topics, you give it parameters, audience, tone, voice, maybe feed it some sample messages, and it can crank out, 5 or 6 fundraising messages in the time that it might take a person to do one. Now, nobody's getting fired because of this. It's not taking people's jobs. It's letting them do a whole lot more in a short time, right? And I think that this kind of AI assist is going to play in a lot of tools, right? We'll probably see AI assistance for audience analysis, but certainly for content creation. That is already here. I'm personally using it for like business logistics kind of things, like a memorandum of understanding, something that has very formulaic language, and an AI is good at cranking those things out. But as always, with any content that you use an AI to create, you had better check the accuracy, right? This thing is just pulling information online and making vast numbers of correlations, among all the words out there. And that does not mean that what it says is true. So people have gotten in big trouble. I believe there was a Donald Trump court filing, or I don't know if it was Trump. I think it was one of the Trump people. It might have been Giuliani, but there was a court. Yeah, it was Giuliani, I think. There was a court filing that they had used an AI chatbot to help with, and it invented some legal citations. So do be wary. And the other thing I'll point out, now we've talked about, with influencers, the idea of influencers. We've talked a good bit about, getting your supporters to be ambassadors, but there are also paid influencer programs out there. And some of them are designed for small organizations and for niche issues, right? So I'm, of course, blanking on them right now when I need them. But a firm called Do Big Things launched a platform specifically for smaller organizations to reach more niche micro influencers. And these are paid programs. So you might be paying somebody who already cares about your issue, right? Paying them for the privilege of trying to reach their audience, just like you pay Mark Zuckerberg via advertising for the privilege of reaching the Facebook audience. But just like an ambassador, the social media influencers are talking to people who trust them. So your message is coming from a trustworthy voice. Again, if you can get somebody to do it out of passion, it is almost certainly going to be, if their heart's in it, they're probably going to do a little bit better job, right? But there are paid influencer programs out there. And again, we don't have to be everywhere ourselves, but if we can find people who already are there, that's great. And then finally, I would just point out that we don't know what's going to happen in the next year, the next 6 months. Threads didn't exist in the public, this time last year. Elon Musk let's put it this way, if Musk hadn't bought Twitter, Twitter would probably be on a very different trajectory right now. So we simply don't know. There are antitrust actions out there that may change the landscape, probably not anytime soon, but maybe over the next couple of years. So what I tend to focus on are two things: content and relationships, right? So build the relationships with your allies, with your supporters, with journalists, with influencers. And those relationships can move as people switch platforms, right? But you can't build the relationship overnight instantly. It's something just like any relationship that needs to be cultivated. I used to, when I did blogger relations trainings back when blogging was the first real social media outlet, I used to talk about buying a blogger a beer day, right? Get to know people who are prominent voices in your field. Try to chat with them socially. You may actually become real life friends. You never know. But that way they know who you are when you pitch them with an idea. This is media relations 101, but not everyone thinks about it in terms of the digital world particularly. So you need the content, as we've alluded to over and over, but you need the relationships. It's the content is the meat and potatoes. The relationships are I'm gonna mangle this metaphor. The relationships are the plates you carry it out to the table on, or something like that. But you really do need both. And the great thing about social media, like email or blast text messages, you're functionally managing relationships with a whole lot of people at once. Via digital tools, you can stay in touch with far more people than you could have done 30 years ago. So, any more questions? Or we can just pop a beer right here.
No, I mean, Colin, you did a terrific job. I think the one thing I would say on influencers is it's like paying for writers, right? It's, so it's not, it shouldn't be considered as, something dirty to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's if you're paying for someone to write a blog post article for you, then or something for your magazine, then an influencer is essentially doing the same thing. You
Mm-hmm.
want that byline, whether it's on social media or in a magazine article.
I think you're right on. And especially in the nonprofit world, there is often an aversion to using money to do things. I've seen so many organizations, I've worked in or worked with organizations that will spend massive amounts of staff time preparing a report or some kind of white paper, and then next to no time letting people know about it, right? They could, if they spent a couple $100 on Facebook, thousands upon thousands of people would have a chance to see that content that they're saving a couple of $100, but they're wasting thousands of dollars worth of staff time. It drives me crazy, honestly. So, yeah, things that are common in the commercial marketing world, people in the nonprofit world sometimes have almost a philosophical problem with. And I don't think that helps. I think it only cripples us. And Kevin has questions here. Are there a few platforms that are effective with communicating across demographic sectors? Kevin, do you want to unmute yourself? And I'm not quite sure what you're getting. I want to understand better what you're getting at.
Well, Colin, what you described is like if your target audience is 23 to 35-year-olds, or you're targeting your audience, but you want to connect different audiences. So that's kind of the question. Get some cross-pollination going.
Between platforms, that's very difficult, right?
Oh no, within one Colin, within one platform to be able to
I
get.
See.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool question. I think that's where things like Facebook groups come in, where like sort of the back channel discussions. If you have if you have active like commenting on your page, lots of people who comment on your page, I'll note that, particularly when people like Charles Whittick, who's on the call here, write for our blog, we get lots of comments on the blog, and you'll get, communication among people on there. I think the more that you can do to foster conversation, asking questions of the audience, right? Asking questions of your Facebook followers, trying to get them actively involved. I'm not going to say stir up fights because that's probably not going to end that well, but to try to create opportunities for people to connect with each other. I'm surprised at how often or how rarely groups will do simple things like, what do you think about this? This development in the news. What do you think? Explicitly asking people to engage.
So let me thank you for that, Colin. And I'll reach back into one of my previous questions, which was asking if you ever mused about designing, the Colin format, platform. Is because I'm right now in the Columbia River Basin. I've actually I've got a concept about having a public forum / learning community. So to create a platform for the Columbia River Basin about salmon ecology and all the influencers about salmon ecology, because I feel we need to get more than just we policy wonkish peoples involved with that. So, what I've ginned up is the concept of doing a feasibility assessment of what that could look like. I'll say, Tom, I don't know if I even talked with you about this, but I'll send the concept to you guys, to all the team and see, and so you can at least watch me as I try to move forward with this.
Well, I'll say there used to be about a dozen years ago, there was a platform called Ning, and it allowed people to create custom social networks. It failed. It is very, very difficult to get people to join a new platform, right? Like what tends to kill social platforms is that they don't get enough people, right? You have to have critical mass so that when a new person comes to the platform, they see that it provides value to them. I would suggest putting your energy into mobilizing people in places, mobilize people where they're already fishing. Don't try to get them to go to a new fishing hole.
Yeah. Well, thanks on that. And I think the other thing that I've been musing about is just, what if there is a public forum and it's well curated, it has good guidelines and guiding principles, so it doesn't go south as some of these forums have. And then I asked myself, well, why are these other forums become problematic and trolling or whatever? And one of the things I think they have to figure out how to monetize themselves. So that's, if you have a forum that does not require monetization, you've got just a different, you have a different expectation by the platform owners, if have you.
Yeah, I mean the thing you're talking about, the community is getting polluted with like negativity. I watched it happen over the weekend on a listserv of internet researchers when someone said, "Why aren't we talking about Gaza and Israel?" Right, and you can imagine how well that ended up, right? And so the list managers had to step in and shut the conversation down, right? That is, in my experience, what almost always has to happen, right? One of the nice things about Facebook is that if people leave negative comments on your post, you can hide them and that person will still see them and their friends will still see them, but nobody else will. And so it doesn't create that cascade, right? I know when I was managing a very large Facebook group a few years ago, organized around wind energy, and very active in wind country, which is Trump country, right? Very conservative rural areas. I would notice that if the first couple of comments were positive, the rest of the comments were typically positive. If the first couple were negative, it would start that cascade. So I think, the way that we keep from getting into that bad spiral is to, my cat Eugene was just trying to join the conversation. The way we avoid getting into that spiral is that it takes active moderation. Communities don't function on their own. We have to collectively work together to make them function. Does that make sense? Okay, it looks like that is the last of the comments for now. Thank you all for joining. And if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook later, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time today. And thank you to the Marine Fish Conservation Network, my longtime collaborators, for giving me the opportunity to talk today. And definitely thanks to Tom Sadler for jumping in, providing context, and occasionally telling me when I might not be entirely 1000% correct. So if you have any questions, any follow-up, my contact information is on the screen right now. I am always happy to chat. So thank you again for taking part in the very first Marine Fish Conservation Deeper Dive.